Hello, welcome to another episode of Books Closed. I am Andrew Stortz. This is episode 49, and I recently had a fantastic conversation with Australian tattooer Onnie O'Leary. Now, Onnie's work I have appreciated from afar for a number of years, and if you don't know it yourself, you are certainly missing out because it is chock full of pornographic and erotic imagery. And when I say that, I'm talking, it is full of massive c***s, big wet p***s, fat fucking tits, people shitting on each other's faces, other people p***ing in others' mouths, daddies, just blasting all over people's faces, juicy, disgusting, wide ass, ripped apart, soaked, fart, and beyond. And it is fantastic. So I was very curious to know what are her inspirations, what sent her on this path of smut. And we got into some other stuff as well. And I want to give you a little disclaimer. Onnie and I had set up for probably weeks before we did this interview to have her set up a nice professional mic setup like I always use here because I didn't want to do the Zoom audio thing. And so she did a test run, sent me test audio. It was fantastic. Everything was good.
The bimbo who'd moved in next door to Danny's and Bridget's apartment 3 weeks earlier. Bridget hadn't had the opportunity of meeting them.
Then, like always, we get on the Zoom call. Technical difficulties. We figured some stuff out, did it, recorded it. It was fantastic. And then it turns out the mic levels were a little wonky. Long story short, it didn't work out. So you're going to have to suffer through some Zoom audio. I don't think it's too distracting, hopefully. And we make some references to what my master plan was, and that was to pretend that we were in a room together and pretend that Onnie was here in Maine recording with me in my studio. And you'll just have to go with it. Just go with the gag, okay? We're trying to have a little fun. I'm trying to make this fun. I'm trying to make it not just another Zoom conversation, okay? Sorry. I will work on the technical side in the future. Before we get started, I want to mention that this episode is sponsored by my pals at Go Reminders, which is something that I use at my shop every single day, but I'll tell you more about that later. One other thing, and that is that I have not made new merch for the show in years. I think I did one t-shirt in the first year, never did anything else, but now I have a new t-shirt that is available on worshiptattoo.com. That's my shop's website. Don't get it confused. It's not on the podcast website. I just don't want to do it, okay? I don't want a million web stores. I'm lazy, okay? worshiptattoo.com. You'll find a bunch of our new merch over there, but most importantly, a new shirt for Books Closed designed by the one and only Taki from State of Grace Tattoo in California. You may remember Taki was one of my very first guests. I think he was episode 4, maybe. It was my first big trip out west to film a bunch of interviews, which made up a bulk of the first season of the show. Taki's been super supportive and super great ever since, and he was amazing enough to design this sick-ass t-shirt. A little treat for you guys if you want to support the show. That is a fantastic way to do so, and look cool as hell while doing it. So anyway, back to the main order of business. The reason that we're all here today, and I don't remember if I had mentioned or not, in Onnie's work, it's just full of massive big rimmed gaping holes and eyeballs. Okay, here it is. Okay, that's it. That's all. I'm not going to tease you anymore. Here's my conversation with Onnie O'Leary. Enjoy. Stuff is recording.
It's great. Do I get like a voiceover? Will I have like, this was, then he came into the room.
Yeah, we'll scramble your voice. So I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to pretend that we are in the room together. So I'm going to say, when we start, I'm just going to say, hey, thanks for coming all the way up here to Maine. I mean, I know it's a long trip for you, but we're protecting your identity. So
that would be great. I've always wanted to go to Maine.
Exactly.
I was a big Stephen King fan. And so that was like a lot of sort of what I learned about America before I'd ever been was kind of Maine.
Yeah.
And my mum's from Vancouver Island, so it's that sort of same end of the world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Maine is pretty much just like Stephen King everywhere.
Yeah, I thought so. Just horrific monsters popping out of antique stores.
Exactly. Yeah, I think his house is like a few hours north of here, and I know people just go out there and stand in front of it all the time, which is probably pretty annoying for him.
Yeah, this is why I keep my identity pretty private.
Yeah, no, that's pretty smart, actually. In hindsight, I think I've probably made the wrong choices in life.
I guess you could always go around as Claude Cloud now.
I could. I know it's funny that enough time has passed on that guy that makes those little action figures that are like tattoo related, he had made a Claude Cloud action figure and he sent it to me. And so I have it up like on a ledge above my station and people are like, "Oh, who's that?" And they think it's like a real, because it says like best whatever, like most popular Instagram tattooer or whatever on it. So people are like, "Who is that? There's a tattoo artist has an action figure." I'm like, "Yeah, he's weird. I don't know." It's like some people it's not worth explaining to, because it's like, how do you even explain that to somebody who has no idea?
Well, I did it the other day because I was talking to a client about doing this podcast, and they hadn't heard of you before, and I was like, "Oh, well, this is the first thing that you have to check out on YouTube of it." I think that was how I came to like find your work. Was through that, and the fantastic video for how to start tattooing.
All my greatest hits.
Oh yeah, well, that one I especially love because that was like very similar to the way that I started tattooing. I had sort of a really informal apprenticeship, and I would be at the shop, which was not a shop, it was a warehouse, and I would come home after that, and I would like look up how to set up tattoo machines on YouTube to try and like reinforce what I'd learned that evening at the shop, so that I wouldn't forget anything.
Hey, whatever works, right? It got you to where you're at, so I guess it all worked out.
That's it. It was certainly not the most direct path to getting where I was. And like I did 2 apprenticeships, so I did that one, and then I moved to the Netherlands and got a real apprenticeship, and just my tattooing just improved dramatically from working in a real shop and not relying on YouTube videos.
Okay. Well, let's give this a proper start. Are you rolling on your end for your audio?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Good. I'm going to keep an eye on that because it seemed to stop out at 29 seconds.
Okay.
Done.
Fantastic. I think I am also recording, but now this is my turn to make sure that all my things are working properly.
I'd feel so relieved if at least one thing wasn't working properly, but yeah, you're a consummate professional now.
Well, I spent probably more than an hour already testing this and making my wife Zoom me from upstairs to make sure that all my things were in order, so I didn't waste too much of your time trying to do this. But I think I'm good.
Sexy Zoom, I hope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was like, just say something. She's like, what do you want me to say? I'm like, just whatever. And she's like, okay, I'm trying to work up here. I just constantly bother her when I'm home, and because she works from home, so I just bother her all the time. She has the door closed, and I'll just like pop my head in, like, hey, what's going on?
That was my experience. I'm living with a friend of mine, and we moved in at the beginning of the pandemic, and he works from home. And as soon as the pandemic hit, I got a bunch of money and just stayed home making a dirty comic with Ugly Tom. And he had to work the whole time, and he'd come out, and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to draw this position. He's just like, you're having a great time, aren't you? It's like, oh yeah, this is the best.
That's the life right there.
It really was. I think Tom had it really good too. He works from like a little creek house out the back of his place in North Carolina, and it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous out there.
Yeah. And
it was like, yeah, both the first time that we'd had any sort of solid time off in a while.
I think that was the case for everyone. I kind of look back on that time and I miss it a little bit because it was nice. It was chill. Yeah.
I think it's easy to forget the like external stress of like what the hell was going on with the world at that time.
Right.
But yeah, when you kind of sit back and appreciate it, it was really good. I remember like 5 o'clock wines on the balcony, watching the sunset was kind of a regular thing.
Right.
And it sort of made me reevaluate, I think definitely like a lot of people, where I was like, wow, this is actually really good. And I think I was like, well, what do I want to have done? Like at the end of my life, what will I regret not doing more? And it was definitely things like that. It's like, I love tattooing and, I want to do it forever. But I was like these kind of moments with like friends and just kind of taking it easy. That's the stuff that I want to do more of.
Tattooing's great, but you don't need to do it all day, every day.
Yeah.
I think that's what I realized.
When I got back to tattooing after the lockdown, we had like 2 big lockdowns here in Sydney. I started freehanding everything. Tom really encouraged me to do more freehand work and was like, yeah, you can do it. You can do it for sure. And I did. And that changed things so radically for me because suddenly I didn't have homework anymore. I wasn't drawing from home. And that's like opened up so much time and space in my life for other things. And I was a little bit worried, I think, that that would detract from tattooing or distract me, but it's been the opposite. I find that everything that I do outside of work is just sort of feeding back into my tattooing. And I think it's like kind of shifted it up. I was worried that it would sort of have the opposite effect than it's done, but it's actually really, I think, tightened things up and given me so much more like mental energy to put back into tattooing.
So you weren't drawing on a lot of your work before that point?
I'd done a few like freehand pieces here and there. I think when people came to me for sort of like Space Girls or Bondage Girls, which are things that I'd sort of done over and over again, I never get tired of those. I was like, okay, I think I feel comfortable to sort of draw this on. But there was stuff. I did a piece last year in Richmond, and it was like a Drew Barrymore portrait with the like Scream character behind her. And I got up in the morning and like I took all my reference pictures of Drew Barrymore and I did a few sketches, and then I got to the shop and I freehanded this portrait on, and I was like, oh wow, I really didn't think I'd be doing this. And I spoke to Tom about it afterwards, and then he's posting this picture of this big eagle back piece that he's done, and he's done all this filigree around the sort of the main figures in this back piece, but he didn't even bother drawing that on. He was like, oh, I don't know how to draw that stuff. It's just flowers and leaves and things. So I just tattooed that straight on. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's really like, I've sort of hit one level and there's like, 1,000 more to go from here.
Yeah.
But it's nice to sort of look back and take stock of, how much further I've sort of come than I thought I would even be able to.
Yeah, I feel like the work that you do is the hard at least for me, it would be the harder stuff to just draw on, like figures and different poses and stuff. And I always feel like I haven't done enough of that to be comfortable drawing it on. And because I feel like I might draw it in the markers, I'd think, all right, this is cool. And then once I tattoo it and I take a picture of it, I'd be like, wow, that's a long thigh, or like that's a big ass foot or something. And like you don't realize it till it's too late sometimes that the proportions are off. But it seems like you're pretty successful in getting like dynamic poses in every single thing that you do, and you're just drawing them on now, and it's pretty awesome to watch.
Oh, thank you. I've been drawing sexy girls since I was like 17. Yeah. So that was, I think, and that was when I really knuckled down. I saw some copies of Heavy Metal magazine that a friend of mine gave me, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. And so I've been doing it for a long time. Now I'm 36 now, so like nearly 20 years. And yeah, it's just practice. There's been a lot of like thighs that are way too long, or feet that are way too big, or or weird. I've done 2 pinups with 2 left feet in my career.
They're special.
Both of them in America, actually. One was in LA. And that was years and years ago, and one really recently, and I didn't realize until it was too late, and the guy was such a champion about it, and I just said, oh, I see what I've done here. And he was so great. He immediately goes, "Oh, that's okay. All my tattoos have something fucked up about them. Look, this one, like he didn't fill in the eyes properly, and this one was supposed to be a lemon, but it looks more like an orange." And
that guy's the eternal optimist.
Yeah. Oh, he really was. And he'd come from, I think, Massachusetts, and he brought me this huge box of like little pies that were the sort of the national dish, and some like soda and things like that. Just a huge box of snacks, which was like really, really lovely of him. Every time I come to the US, like clients are just amazing. They're always so sort of generous and enthusiastic. And
yeah, that's the fun part about being a guest is everybody treats you like royalty. It's hard to want to go home after that.
It is, and that's it. I get home and everyone's like, "Hey, Onnie, how was America?" I'm like, "Oh, it was so great." "What are you doing?" "Oh, another sexy girl."
Well, to give this a proper start, I'm talking here with, is it Onnie or Onnie? How do you say your name? I don't want to say it wrong.
Well, I say it Onnie.
Onnie.
But
how do Americans say it?
A lot of people say it Onnie. But if you want to say it the way I do, it's Onnie. But I'm not fussy.
That's how I always say it in my head. I think we all read people's names on Instagram a certain way, so I'm lucky to say that I've been saying it right in my head all this time, so it's not going to be too much of an adjustment. So we're here today, and we're recording in my secret podcast bunker because Onnie is we're protecting her identity from the Instagram police, because after all of these erotic tattoos and artwork that's been posted, she has a warrant out for her arrest, and we need to protect her identity at all costs. So that's why, if you're watching this on YouTube, this episode's a little different than others, but it's for the greater good, and I hope that you can all appreciate that. So we've got the lights turned low. We can barely see what's going on, but the show must go on. So we can still use our voices to channel each other's curiosities and questions.
Well, thank you for having me here in the secret tattoo bunker.
Of course. I only open it to the most supreme of guests. So you're definitely up there, and I'm excited to finally get a chance to talk to you, because I feel like I've been following your work for a long time, and I just don't really know anything about you as a person. So this is pretty exciting to get to talk to you.
Yeah. It's something I think ever since I first started, I've been very reticent to sort of share much of my identity online. And I think that sort of extends to almost all of my social media. Like I have a personal Instagram account, but it's just for memes. When I first started was 11 years ago now, and I think that at the time, obviously there's been women in tattooing for a really long time, but it was just sort of starting to open up, I felt, and there was certainly a lot of derision in the industry for women using their image or their sexuality for, I guess, to promote their work. And I think I really wanted my work to be taken on its own merit, and I think especially because it's so sexual as well, like that element is kind of already present in what you see. And I don't think I feel the same way about it now, but certainly I have another friend, actually, the guy who taught me to tattoo initially, later on went on to become a huge YouTube star, and I definitely see him struggling with being recognized all the time in public. And when we go out for a drink or something, you see people passing and they turn their head to look at him, and he's certainly, I think, feels very self-conscious about that. So I really appreciate that, I have a certain level of notoriety within the tattoo community, but even at conventions and stuff, people don't know when they come up to the booth, whether it's me or whether it's, Tom's wife got mistaken for me at Pagoda recently. Or like I've taken partners to help out at conventions before, and people go, "Oh, hey man, I love your work." Even when I'm sitting behind them tattooing.
That's interesting. I feel like that takes a lot of foresight, like at the beginning of your career, to realize that you want to kind of separate your own, like your personal identity from the identity of your work. So if you started 11 years ago, so you were like in your mid-20s, what did you do up until that point? So I wonder where that wisdom comes from to think ahead like that, because I think a lot of people might not.
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly had high expectations for myself when I started tattooing, but I don't think I necessarily envisioned, I think, having a following like I do now. But before that, I studied fine art at university, and then when I finished that, I went and studied fine art at TAFE, which is like a sort of like vocational college here in Australia. And it was sort of through TAFE that I realised that I could be a full-time artist. That was the first time any sort of teacher had been like, "Oh yeah, you could practice art full-time. You don't have to do anything else on the side." And that was such a revelation for me. I was really like, whoa. My painting teacher took a group of us to Sydney. I was like studying about 2 hours north of Sydney, and he took a group of us to Sydney to see a bunch of galleries. And I remember talking to this artist in one of the galleries, and he had all these big paintings on the wall. And I said, "Oh, like, so, how many shows?" He's like, "Oh, I have 2 shows a year." And I was like, "Oh, well, do you have another job? Like, do you do anything else for work?" And he was like, "Oh, no, just that." And then I spend the rest of the time painting. And I was like, oh, this is, this is for me. So when I left studying, I had no idea what I was going to do with art, but I knew that I wanted to make art full time so that I didn't have to do anything else. And I did a bunch of other jobs. I did a lot of customer service. I worked in retail. I used to check bags at Target, and I worked at a call center for like 6 years, which was fantastic because I could draw. We just had to read out these surveys to people, and I had all the questions memorized. So I would just flick my eyes up to the screen, read the question, and keep drawing. And I drew a lot of really erotic stuff. And I remember one of the supervisors who had been a former priest. He was such a character, Kevin. He had been a former priest who'd been caught out doing drugs on a dance floor in a gay nightclub, and that meant that he had to leave his family and then come and work at this call center. And he came up to me and he was like, "Oh, Onnie, I don't know. I think some people might find this a little bit offensive." And I said, "Oh, yes, I know, Kevin. That's okay." And he said, "Oh, all right then, okay." And that was it. But I got to do a lot of drawing there, and that really sort of honed my skills. In answer to your question, I'm not really sure where the kind of foresight came from to separate my art and my identity. I think in some ways maybe it came from a certain sense of insecurity where I felt like, I think I remember one of the really big names in tattooing at the time was Sarah Fable, and like she's just this sort of stunning Scandinavian model. And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to kind of pull things off to that level where I'm like doing all this modeling. Would there even be any benefit to me trying to use my like personal sexuality to sell my work when I can just use the work itself to do that?"
Which I think is cooler because that leaves more to the imagination anyway. Like when you read a book and you can like imagine what you think everybody looks like or whatever about characters and stuff. I think just knowing your work, it leaves more to interpretation too, which is cool when it comes to art stuff. And I think it's rare in tattooing because we are so connected to our work typically.
Yeah, and there's definitely in any sort of form of illustration, you can pair a face right down to, sort of 2 dots in a half circle, and we all know that that's a smile. And certainly like my artwork, a lot of it is self-referential. I often use myself as a model and things like that. But I'm really surprised by the variety of women who come up to me and say, like, "I saw your tattoos and I really recognized myself in them." And all different women, all different body types and sort of sizes and shapes. And they all say like, "Oh yeah, I saw that and I really identified with it." And yeah, I think sometimes you can lose that if you're like, "This is me and this is who I am, and also here's my artwork." So I do appreciate that not presenting myself as part of the work means that more people see it and identify with it. Because I think that's very much been my goal with my artwork for a really long time, is to sort of promote this sort of positive view of sexuality, and that it's something to really be enjoyed, and that we can sort of, revel in what our bodies are capable of. And it's I'm really lucky, I think, to get to do that as much as I do, and to get so much nice feedback from people about the success that I've had in that.
Yeah. And on the other side of the feedback, do you have a problem with people like reporting your posts when you're posting artwork?
I don't think it's people reporting my posts. I think it's I think it's the algorithm mostly. There's maybe one. Look, I did do a tattoo. I reckon it was probably reported because it got on Snake Pit, and even on Snake Pit, people were not happy about it.
What was it?
Which is, it's a lot to say that they didn't like it on Snake Pit. But I was visiting Italy, and I had this Italian guy come and say, like, I want the most sacrilegious tattoo that you can do. Do you have any ideas? And so for some context, like my mother was a lay minister for quite a while. So I grew up in a very religious household, not conservative, but definitely very religious. And, where you didn't take the Lord's name in vain. And we would hold hands and pray at the dinner table, which is how, I ended up being obsessed with sex. And like my sister.
It always backfires.
For a while. And that's how it happens. But this guy said, I want the most sacrilegious tattoo you can do. And I thought, oh, brilliant. Actually, I've had this idea for a while. I did a tattoo for a friend of mine that was a demon having sex with two nuns. And I thought, you always see this sort of the nuns being like converted away from their life of piety. And I was like, what about the other way around? So I did this tattoo of Jesus getting a hand job from two demon girls. And he's sort of, doing the very classic, like Freddie Corbin, like sad, like thrown up eyes and stuff. And, is it agony or is it ecstasy? We can't tell. But he had this big halo around him, and I gave his penis a little halo as well. And there's a story in the Bible in Matthew where Jesus goes out to the desert and Satan tempts him. And in the Bible, it's like with food and I think water and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't think Satan would stop there. Like if you really want to tempt a 33-year-old guy with no wife, like how would I do it? So I like to think that there's at least some like biblical accuracy there. But yeah, that certainly really upset people, and they sort of didn't like that one very much, or they loved it. It was it was really one way or the other.
It's funny how everyone's got their own line, and that seems to be like a line that could be crossed for a lot more people than the typical like whatever else non-Jesus sexual scenario in art.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading a book about religion and sort of the formulation of religion in humanity, why we have it. And this author, Daniel Dennett, was talking. He said, what is sacred to us is anything that we're offended by. Like anything that, like, if you challenge me and I'm offended by that, that's what's sacred to us. And so, I mean, for some people, that's like full color tattoos and, with no black. And yeah, for some people, it's the idea of Jesus getting a hand job. And that to me, I think it really sort of opened my eyes to a lot of stuff, because tattooing, I think, in a way, is a lot like religion, and it certainly sort of provides a community and sort of a framework for people to live their lives around. And there's a lot of ideas in tattooing that I think sort of mirror religion in that way. And certainly things that you can and can't say in a tattoo shop. You can't do an upside down tattoo and things like that.
Right. But people do it all the time.
All the time, yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Go Reminders, which I use at my tattoo shop every single day. As we're coming into a new year, we're already at the end of January. I know that I've been thinking about how to be the best new version of myself. New year, new me, they say. And a big part of that, as tattooers, I think, thinking about how we can fine-tune and how we can tighten up our booking process might be one of the most important and effective changes that we can make. Go Reminders might be just that missing piece that you've been looking for. All you have to do is plug in your appointment information to Go Reminders, and they will automatically send out text messages, emails, whatever you'd like to your clients ahead of time to get those very important confirmations. We've all sat there on our hands while our clients decided that it wasn't that important for them to show up and get their tattoo that they scheduled, even though they left a deposit. And while you get to keep that deposit and laugh all the way to the bank through the tears, it's never enough to cover the time that you've now wasted by losing a day, a half day, hours of your day to these flaky clients. Let Go Reminders weed out those people for you. Send out message a week ahead. That's what we do at my shop. I have a text message set up. Each artist at the shop has personalized messages. Bring! Hey, in a week at this day and this time, you have an appointment with Andrew. Reply to confirm. It's fantastic, okay? Because you can try to play tag with your clients yourself, but you will quickly realize that it is a fool's errand and things will slip through the cracks. So let Go Reminders add a little automation to your booking process. Okay? Capiche? Okay. Give yourself a raise this year by actually making sure that your appointments show up at the agreed upon time. Is it that hard for them? Yes, it can be, okay? Some people just need that reminder, so give yourself that raise. God damn it, you deserve it. You are worth it. Head over to goreminders.com today. Get set up with your account and let them pull some of that weight for you. Now, I'm not just a paid spokesperson. I'm also a Go Reminders user. Thank you, Go Reminders, for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back to my conversation with Onnie. I always got a kick out of doing upside down crosses on people's wrists when they definitely wanted them to be like a nice classic cross, but they insist that it faced them, but they just left with an upside down cross on their wrist. I always got a kick out of that.
That's it. I think I did explain to one guy once who came in. I used to work in a walk-in shop near a Backpackers. Yeah, he came in to get a cross and he said, no, I want it for me. And I said, yeah, but everyone else is going to think that, it's upside down, like you love Satan. Oh, no, I don't want that. I said, okay, well, we'd better do it the right way up then.
You're like, well, we could do Jesus, and what's the best way to honor Jesus is to by giving him sexual gratification from the most tempting of demon women. So, what does your family think about your artwork then? If there's some religion swirling around in your background.
They're pretty great. They're very supportive. If anything, my dad is too supportive, like, bless him. You might see him sometimes pop up on my Instagram. Oh, great work, Onnie. And I'm like, oh, God, Dad, I can't believe you're looking at this. He really wanted to see that comic that I did with Tom. And I had to say no. I was like, Dad, it's porn. It's pornography. I'm not sending. He was so disappointed. He's like, we just want to see your work. We're very proud of you. I know you work so hard. I know, Dad, but it's still a no.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. He might not be able to look at you the same.
That's it. I want to maintain a nice family relationship. And
do you think part of the
I do
intrigue
appreciate
of
the support? But
yeah, of course. Yeah, my parents are the same way. Definitely, my dad is similar, where he's up in my comments saying, "Nice one, great job," and but I'm not sure how much he understands actually what happens or like the process of things or how things work. But he just sees the pictures and he thinks they're cool, and I think that's very nice.
That is nice. I've been doing some like printmaking recently with my partner and sort of posting pictures of that. And my dad will be like, "Oh, great work, Onnie. Very different stuff. It's not that one's not mine, Dad. That's So yeah, I'm not sure how much he follows, but he's certainly very supportive.
Yeah, that never hurts. If the worst thing is he sees your twisted pornographic mind in form of art that you've produced, then that's, there are way worse things, and he probably would just be as supportive, even if he had to bite his tongue, or maybe he'd like it a little too much.
Yeah, I know my mum, and I wasn't present for this, but my sister told me afterwards, like when I was about 19, and I had a huge pile of sketchbooks. I've always had big piles of sketchbooks. I want to do a book sometime soon with Raking Light of like all these sketchbooks. But my mum found a big tub of my sketchbooks and was flipping through them, and it was so much sort of erotica, and then sort of records of people that I'd slept with and things like that. And my sister caught her and she said, "Oh dear, well, I'm sure it's just a phase." And I think about that often. I'm like, "Oh, sorry, Mum, now it's a career."
But maybe that's easier to justify. Like, what's easier to justify than a phase? And if it's your career, I mean, then that's just how it is. How can you argue that?
Yeah. And I think when I first started tattooing, they were a bit hesitant. I'm sure, like most parents are, like, "Really? Is this really what you want to do?" But I knew from the first time I did a tattoo, I was like, "Oh, this is for me. This is what I want to do. This is going to be my thing now." Yeah.
Well, even like 10 years ago, it didn't necessarily seem like a viable career yet. Like, I feel like the way that people look at being a tattooer as a career is so different now than it has been in the past.
Oh, it's huge. And I think sometimes you even get parents sort of pushing their children towards a
"Oh, my
career
kid's so good at drawing. Oh, you should see their drawings. Oh, they're so good." And yeah, you definitely hear that every so often. And I feel like it happens more than ever now.
Yes. Yeah, that definitely wasn't the case when I started.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were sort of hesitant, but I was really, really determined. And like I mentioned, like I moved to the Netherlands after I'd been sort of tattooing out of the warehouse scene in Sydney for a year. I moved to the Netherlands and got a proper apprenticeship. And I think then they sort of were like, "Okay, she's really serious about this." And
how did that opportunity arise?
Just a huge set of balls, really. I'd been traveling around Europe like 2 years prior to that, and I loved Amsterdam. I was like, I was sitting at this bar in a coffee shop. This was on the first trip, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to live here." And the girl who was at the counter said, "Well, you're Australian, you can live here." And I thought, "Oh, that's well, maybe I will then." And I came home, and I wanted to do it right away, but I needed to save up some money. And so I started saving, and then I met this tattooer at a life drawing class, and he said, "Oh, these drawings would make great tattoos." And I said, "Oh, I've always wanted to be a tattooer." And he said, "I'll teach you." And I think he was kind of joking, but I really took that and ran with it. And
so he showed up
so
the next day
later,
at the shop?
Yeah. Well, I called him up like the next day and was like, "Are you doing any tattooing today? Can I come and watch? Do you need anything? I'll bring you some paper towels and some distilled water and stuff." But yeah, so it was always sort of the plan for me to move to the Netherlands. But I originally I was going to sell postcards on the street, because I think at the time you could get a busker's license there for €50. And this guy who was the partner of a girl who worked at that same coffee shop was apparently making a great living selling photos of the buildings and his girlfriend's feet and, all kinds of stuff on the street. And so I thought, well, I could probably do that. I can draw. I'll just do sort of touristy drawings and sell them, and that might work. But when I started tattooing, I thought, oh, well, this is a skill that I could probably take. And I thought, I was like, I knew after a year that I wasn't good enough to work in a proper shop. And so I thought, if I go over to the Netherlands and do a year there, then I'll be good enough by the time I come back to Australia to get a job in a shop. And in hindsight, that was such a huge, I think, goal to set myself. And but I sort of somehow managed it. And when I came back to Australia, I applied to a couple of studios for guest spots, and then ended up working at one of them. And went back overseas for a bit, came back to Australia, went traveling. I've sort of been traveling, I think, ever since then, off and on with little breaks at home. And
the current shop that I'm at, they when I worked there for a couple of days and then the couple of days sort of extended and then extended, and they said, well, look, if you'd like to work here, we'd be happy to have you. And I said, that'd be fantastic, but I'm going to be gone for 5 months this year. And they were like, well, that's okay. That's you do whatever you want to do. But yeah, if you want to work here, you're welcome.
Well, that's
so
nice.
I'm very, very fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have all that freedom.
Yeah, it is. I'm so lucky. The boys, like TLD, or the Lion's Den, which is where I'm working now. It's great. It's a shop run by 2 tattooers, and I think that makes a really big difference.
Absolutely.
And they've always been fantastic about how much I travel and about the kind of flexibility I think that all tattooers sort of want and need.
Yeah, I feel like when you run a shop, you can't expect the people that work there to do something that you wouldn't do or that you don't want to do. And I feel like that's the important part about like giving people the freedom and the stuff that you just need to do it. If you want to keep people around, you got to let them be and let them go and then let them come back. And that's just how it has to be.
And it really works. We've had the same core team since I started there in 2017. We just had one more woman start there, Anika, and I'm like, oh, that was it. That was perfect. I just wanted like one more lady in the shop because I think there's 7 of us now, and yeah, so 5 guys and me and Anika, and it's really good balance.
Nice. So I've always had a theory, maybe not a theory, maybe just a perception of Australian and European tattooers that they just do cooler tattoos. And it maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just how the internet shows it, but I just remember when I was first starting, like the cooler, like weird traditional tattoos, anytime something was like weird and cool and interesting and different, it was never in the US. It was, I mean, of course there's great American tattooers, but for the most part, there was just like this different brand of like weird and different traditional kind of tattooing and other styles. And it was always in Europe and Australia.
Yeah,
Why
I think
is
Sydney's
that?
got this. Oh.
I need to know the secret. I'm trying to tap into it still.
So I think there's kind of two parts to it. I think one, I mean, I can't speak for Europe, but in Australia, we feel so far away from everything. And it's kind of like if you want to get noticed, like you'd better do something good and big and crazy, because otherwise no one's going to look your way. Like we're way down in the arse end of the world. How else do you kind of get noticed? I really want to go to Spain, and I'd love to go back to Italy again as well, because I feel like they're just doing the wildest, most out there stuff. It's really, really interesting. But Sydney has this kind of like trippy trad style where it's sort of weirdly psychedelic and a real mix of stuff. I think maybe like we're not connected to that history of tattooing in the same way that the US is. Like we obviously here in Australia have like old tattooers. Like everyone knows Tony Cohen and maybe like Max Chater and sort of guys who have been working for a really long time, but they're very much sort of outlaws. Like we don't have the same like history of this is how you do a traditional tattoo, and so I think we're a little bit more free to kind of play with those kind of traditions and stuff.
Yeah, that's probably a good liberating thing to feel. Because I feel like a lot of times in the past I've felt kind of like I don't know if held back is the word, but just like trying to like play into how things are supposed to be. And that has kind of limited me in different times. So when you started though, what was your perception of American tattooing?
I guess it was very much in the traditional vein. And it wasn't until I was looking at European tattooers, and there's an artist, Léa Nahon, and I think she's in France now. She was maybe in Belgium then. But her work was the first time I'd ever seen someone who worked exclusively in their own style that didn't look like any sort of tattoos I'd ever seen before. And that was a real galaxy brain moment. I was like, oh my God, you can, this sounds bad to say, but like you can do tattoos that look like art. And that really sort of changed things for me. I thought, oh yeah, maybe I don't have to do tattoos the way that they've always been done. Maybe I can do them in my own way. And that can be a good and a bad thing, because I did a lot of really awful tattoos trying to break the mold.
Right.
The way all art school kids do. I think art school kids have the hardest time in tattooing in some ways, because you come to it thinking like, I know oil painting, I know printmaking, I know ceramics, like as if I won't be able to pick this up. And it is not easy to do.
Yeah, because I feel like you can spend a lot of time trying to learn how to tattoo what you've already developed, and it may not be right for tattooing. So it takes some time to not only make the mistakes, but also realize it, then like relearn stuff. So that can definitely be hurdles, I would think.
Huge hurdles, yeah. And that was very much my sort of progress, I think. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of people who were like, yeah, we love your art, I'd love to get tattooed, and sort of let me really make those mistakes on them. I've definitely fixed up quite a few of my old pieces. And
it's a circle of life.
Yeah. Actually, my partner showed me a panther tattoo on his ankle this morning. He said, it's a cover-up. I said, I know. You can tell. It's got like it's like a panther head with this huge long black neck.
It's just a particular species of panther with a very long neck.
That's it, very long,
native
very
to Australia.
Well, I got a big black panther with the cover up in the neck as well on my ribs, but it's from Peter Lagergren, and he did an amazing job of that one. I was it was painful, but he did a good job. I was like, if I'm going to get a huge panther on my ribs, I'm going to go a really, really long way away so that I can't back out of it. I was like, we got 2 sessions booked. We're getting this tattoo done, and then I'm going home again. I'm not paying another sort of $2,000 or whatever to fly to Sweden and back for like the last hour of the tattoo that I can't handle.
Totally. Yeah. Sometimes you need that motivation. I can think a lot of times where I've been getting tattooed by some of my favorite tattooers, and like just that alone is enough to be like, all right, keep your head in the game. You got to get through this. You don't want to look like a chump. You got to get this done. And I think about people who just like walk into a shop and they don't care who they get tattooed by, and they just get something. And I really admire that, because it hurts so bad that sometimes I need that push of not embarrassing myself in front of somebody that I admire to get me through the process.
God, absolutely. Actually, speaking of embarrassing yourself in front of great tattooers, I have so many stories of doing that. But I just got my back finished off by Khalil Rinche at Tattoo City, and so I've worked there quite a bit, and I've met Ed quite a few times. But it seems like he always comes in when we're like a couple of hours deep into a session, and so I'm like naked with socks on, lying on the bed, just sweating, and he's like, "Oh, hello, Onnie." I'm like, "Hello."
Full on tattoo brain.
Just knows me as that sweaty girl.
God, she's sweaty. Nice girl, but very sweaty. I'm sure he gets it. I'm sure he's brought a lot of people to their sweatiest and most tattoo-brained points in life too. So if anyone understands it, it's him.
I hope so. That shop's just magic. It's just magic to work in.
Yeah,
I
what's
got
it
to
like
work
getting
in
to?
Station.
Yeah, I see that you get to visit there quite a bit. So what is it like walking into Tattoo City for the first time for you?
Oh, for the first time, it's I don't know. You can kind of feel the ghosts there, I think, and it's a little bit overwhelming. I mean, the flash, especially for an Australian, someone who's from so far away. I mean, these are the archives like on the wall, and it's like, wow, I've seen pictures on Instagram, and I've read tattoo books and stuff, and here's the actual Flash, the real, like the Joe Liebermans and the Burt Grimms and all of that. And you think, oh my God, like when I stand in front of this painting or this Flash sheet, I'm standing exactly where the artist stood. I'm right in their shadow. And I love that about tattooing. Like art history, sort of extends back so far that you can only sort of imagine that kind of stuff. But tattoos history seems so recent, and it's so almost easy to be able to reach out to people that you look up to, or figures who've been working in the industry for so long, and say hello. And that bridge is really small. It doesn't take much to cross it. But yeah, Tattoo City, wow, it's fantastic there. I worked in Khalil's station the first time I visited, and I don't know if you've been there, but it's little cubicles for all the tattooers. So you sort of walk in and there's all of this Flash on the walls, and then you sort of come through the swinging gate and there's a corridor, and there's like little stables almost on either side of the corridor, and everyone has their own little cubicle that's theirs. And when I worked there, it was, I think, before he did a big clean out, but the walls were like an inch thick with the line drawings for like back piece after back piece and leg sleeves and huge arm sleeves. And it's all so incredibly detailed. And when I didn't have clients, I would sort of be flipping through these like sort of hanging drawings and just soaking it all in. And I was like, oh, wow. And I think it wasn't until maybe the second time I was there that I actually got to meet him. And that's when I was like, oh, yeah, this is who I want to do my back piece for me. Yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah,
his work is so different. I mean, speaking of people who do unique and interesting work, like, I mean, that's like the definition of it is the stuff he does. And it's crazy. It is crazy. I think it's like all these fantastic elements of Japanese and all of these elements of traditional tattooing just really, really distilled down. And I don't know anyone else who can make such wildly complicated and detailed work that is so clear and readable despite all of that detail. I think there's often a temptation to, detail really impresses people, you can do a nice wood grain sort of thing, and you just have to do a few broken lines. And as long as you do a bunch of them in there, people are like, oh, look at that wood grain. That's incredible. But Khalil's, like the detail that he puts in his work is never superfluous. It's always like exactly where it's supposed to be. And I really admire that. And on top of that is just an amazing human being. And that was really important. I'd spoken to a few people who'd sort of maybe started back pieces and hadn't finished them because they hadn't gelled with their artist well, or they'd felt really uncomfortable. And I thought, sure, if I have to be naked with someone for like hours at a time for like X amount of sessions, I want it to be someone who I know I have a good rapport with and who's going to sort of respect that process and everything. And that's very much him. And, oh, God, I learned so much from getting tattooed by him as well. I think, for all the sort of money that I invested in that back piece, I've gained more knowledge and more experience about how to be a great tattooer by taking care of people through the process. And, that's invaluable in itself. I always say that I wish I could go back and get get sleeves again and get a back piece again, because I would get so much more out of it. Even like every 5 years you would get something different out of it than 5 yeyears ago. But it's like I haven't gotten my arms tattooed in like so many years. I wish I could just do it again, and I feel like I would gain so much, because like early on you take on, there's things that I learned and things I remember from the people who tattooed me when I was first starting, but it's like surface level stuff that now I wish I could get that front row seat to that whole process again. And I would get like different sleeves and like different approaches and just try to like soak it all in.
Yeah, me too. I was wondering what spots do you have left to tattoo? I guess apart from your face. Do you have your hands done?
No, I don't have my hands. I definitely have spaces left, but nothing too huge. So it's like getting down to just the really bad, painful, and the spots that nobody ever sees. So it's like the in-between spots, like the inner thighs and all those dumb spots that you regret the whole time you're receiving them because it sucks so bad. But you do it just for the sake of completion.
Yep. Yeah, I really feel I do a lot of those kind of inner thigh spots for people because they want to get something that's hidden. If it's going to be really explicit.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you that. Yeah, do you find that that's common?
Yeah.
Putting them in like the shunga spots, like under their armpit, kind of like upper rib areas and stuff like that.
Ooh, I haven't done too many armpit tattoos. That would be interesting. I think that would be like a good challenge in terms of like the anatomy. And but yeah, look, a lot of thighs. I do a lot of thighs, inner thighs, some inner arms, a lot of rib pieces. People often want like a sort of big erotic rib piece, which is good. Some butt cheeks. But yeah, mainly thighs, which I'm very happy with. The front of the thigh is just my favorite spot to tattoo.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than that.
It really doesn't. It's so comfortable.
Do you find that you ever have like younger clients who maybe want something that's very large and visible, and do you suggest that maybe that's not the way to go for them right off the bat, depending who they are?
Yeah, I'm pretty reticent to tattoo anything really explicit on people's forearms or anywhere that's really visible. I mean, I don't have my hands or face tattooed, and I really appreciate the ability to shift between, sort of being a visibly tattooed person and not. If I wear something with long sleeves, then it's very difficult to tell that I've got tattoos at all. And I appreciate being able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think even I had an amazing customer recently who wanted a forearm piece, and he was like, look, anything that you want, no matter how explicit, that's totally fine. And I definitely sort of dialed it back from what I was initially thinking. I was kind of like, yeah, maybe I'll do this. And I just thought, I don't know if I can do this in good conscience, put something, with real like penis in the vagina, kind of right there, because maybe, and it's like, sure, you should give people what they want. And I'm certainly, I can't tell what this guy's life is like or what he really wants after meeting him for an hour, but I can only base it on my own experience, how much I appreciate being able to hide my tattoos sometimes. And I don't have explicit tattoos anywhere visible. But yeah, I think once you look down at my legs, there's a few more sort of dirty ones.
Yeah, I feel like there's always some tattooers that like get off on doing the most heinous thing to people, and that's never really sat well with me. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, I do, and that's very much not my vibe either. I don't want to make people's lives worse. Yeah.
Exactly. I don't know if I've ever told this story in the podcast before, but I remember a bunch of years ago at the Boston Tattoo Convention, there was a woman that was walking down the aisle, and I just saw her going booth to booth to booth to booth, and she was kind of older. She didn't look like she was maybe fully in the right mind, whether, whatever the reason was, I don't know. But she was asking everybody to tattoo a bullet hole on her forehead. And it just felt weird. The whole interaction was weird, and I just saw like a half dozen people, politely turn her down, which is all I would have hoped everyone would have done. And when she got up to my booth, I said, I don't think, I'm not comfortable doing it. I'm sorry. I can't do that tattoo for you. And then, 2 hours later, you see her walking down the aisle with a fucking bullet hole tattooed on her forehead with like blood dripping out of it. It looked crazy. It looked insane. And I just it made me feel so bad because I can't look at that situation in any way except seeing that somebody like took advantage of that because they wanted to do it to like post the photo on Instagram or whatever it was at that time. And it just feels shitty. And I think I think about that a lot, and I didn't need to learn that lesson to not do those things, but it like really reinforces it in my head now. And I've had certain people request certain things that I like really, really probably go too far and being like, maybe you should think about it. Maybe you want to, consider this, or maybe you want to consider that, because I don't want to be the one doing fucking bullet holes on people's foreheads.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of thing, I think there was some like TV show or article that came out about, whether
tattoos were sort of, I guess, like an acceptable and helpful form of self-harm for people who were, maybe struggling with mental health issues and would normally sort of hurt themselves in more damaging ways. But like since discovering tattooing, kind of found an outlet for that that was in like, I guess, a more safe and like sanctioned environment. And I certainly, when I look back on my life, I think the times that I've tattooed myself, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I wasn't like a little bit of emotional turmoil there. And so I do think, I mean, especially sort of tattooing your face it's a very strong statement, and it's a very strong message, like a sort of an indiscriminate broadcast to anyone who looks at you about yourself. And I think that's why those tattoos are so powerful. But yeah, also why we have such a strong reaction to that, because we like, I mean, you want to get this tattoo on your face and you know that you're sending a message, and when you see it, you know that, I mean, you are and you aren't the intended recipient, but there's always going to be a response from people. You don't have a choice about whether you can cover it up or expose it to say something. So
and it seems like people are so tattooed now that tattooing your face is one of the final frontiers and still being kind of like an outsider, or at least like choosing to make yourself visually an outsider.
Yeah, it is. And even though, attitudes have really shifted in sort of the last like 10, 11 years that I've been doing it. When I started, it was like an absolute no. You had to be tattooed sort of neck to toenails to even ask to get a face or a hand tattoo. And that's definitely changed a lot now. But I do still think that a face tattoo is very powerful. And Instagram, I think in some ways has kind of opened that up. Definitely that's part of why they're so much more visible these days. Yeah.
It's kind of, I never thought that it would be a trendy thing, but there definitely is, somewhat of a trend in popular culture with face tattoos. And I'm surprised. And I wonder how long it will last, or if it will just keep progressing to like more substantial face tattooing, or, when it comes to celebrities and what that's going to do to people and their views of it being more and more normalized.
Yeah, I think with the popularity of laser too, it doesn't feel like such a permanent decision. I think people maybe think that like, oh yeah, I can get this face tattoo now and I'll look really hard. And then if I change my mind, I can just get it lasered
just
off.
take it off. Yeah. It's so short-sighted.
It's so easy and painless.
Oh God. Yeah, that's quite a task to sign up for. But yeah, I've definitely heard people. I mean, I've had, when working in walk-in shops, I've had people come in for small tattoos, and they seem kind of like flippant about what they're getting, or almost unsure. And I'm like, well, we don't have to do this, or we can take more time to figure out what you want. They're like, well, if I don't like it, then I'll just get it removed. Like totally no big deal. And I'm just like, well, it doesn't always work that way.
I saw a guy with like this chest piece, and it was just black, the easiest one to laser off. Yeah. And he'd had like 6 sessions on it, and it was like barely faded. It just looked like a badly done tattoo. And that was it. And he said, yeah, I think we're just going to cover it up now. I was like, oh, yeah, that one's not going anywhere, not after 6 sessions.
Well, have you heard about the places that do non-permanent tattoos now?
I have. I actually covered up a non-permanent tattoo. I was working in Brighton on a guest spot years ago, and this woman had gotten a non-permanent tattoo down on the pier in the 60s. And she came in like, 2014, 15 to get it covered up because it was still there, disappeared. Yeah.
But I mean, like now in New York City, there's like these boutique, beautiful, they look like hair salons, and they're doing these tattoos that last 1 year. That's their whole claim to fame, is that you get it, and then the day you get it, it starts falling apart for a year. And I just feel like it's not a good thing either, because it looks okay for like, a month or two. And then I worry that people don't realize that it's in like 1 year, they're not going to wake up and it's just gone. It's just going to be in a perpetual state of like falling apart and being shitty looking and shittier until hopefully it's mostly gone. But I also think that the kinds of, like, imagine the kind of tattooer who would work at a place like that. Probably not the most skilled, I would assume.
You'll be glad it's gone.
Yeah. So it's like, you think about the inconsistencies and how that looks as tattoos heal and age, and that sometimes the line's a little thicker. Sometimes it's a lot thicker in a certain spot for whatever reason, And I just feel like even using what I'm assuming is like what they use with cosmetic tattooing, the different pigments that don't last forever on purpose. I figure it's got to be the same stuff as that, but there's got to be a way you can put it in. If you blow that shit out, it might still be there in like a weird blobby way that you don't want.
Well, I think that was what had happened to this woman.
Yeah.
And so people are kind of like, this new semi-permanent tattooing. I'm like, oh no, they've had that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think it's just being remarketed now, because, through social media and through the kind of fancy boutique sort of shops. The shop that I work at is like the brightest traditionalist shop you've ever seen. It's like, it's great. Like my room's painted Neapolitan, it's covered in tattoos. But yeah, a lot of those, I think a lot of the new places that are opening up are they do kind of look like hair salons or like waxing places or something.
Because they're inviting and they're familiar. It's a good gimmick, I think, to get more people in the door and more people comfortable, because like tattooing's kind of fighting this uphill battle of like trying to right the wrongs of the past and people's bad experiences and stuff. So I feel like it's a natural progression for this sort of like boutique tattoo studio to emerge as like a bigger thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say now that I'm in tattooing, but I love that like tattooing was a little bit scary.
Of course, we all romanticize that.
Yeah, definitely. But it's like there's a greater sense of satisfaction if you have more apprehension, like going into it. And then like, once you get your first tattoo, you're so proud of like having gone past, your fear of like the scary tattoo shop and the scary tattoo people.
Right.
So yeah, that's nice. But look, I mean, if semi-permanent tattooing is someone's entryway into getting a permanent tattoo, then great. If they get that and then they decide they want it covered up or they like it and they want more, then fantastic. Like, maybe next they'll get a really dirty tattoo of a demon girl.
Yeah. I guess as tattooers that we should be open to any sort of like door that opens this world to people, because who knows what it could turn into for them.
That's it. Yeah. And I mean, that was certainly my case. I think if tattooing hadn't sort of opened up from as much as it had by like 2011, 2012 when I started, I don't think I would have started. I looked into doing an apprenticeship when I was at like that vocational college at TAFE. And I was like, I went to this shop in like Newcastle, which is kind of a portside town. And I think there were 2 tattoo shops, in the whole town. I'm sure that's changed now. It definitely has actually. But I remember, and I had a talk to the guy, Brad, who worked there, and he looked at my drawings and he said, yeah, these are good. Like you could potentially be a tattooer. I said, okay. But I sort of thought about it and I was like, no, I think this is a little bit scary for me. I don't know if this is the environment that I would feel comfortable working in. And I think my boyfriend at the time also said like, yeah, I don't know if this is for you, Onnie. I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough. I'll look for something else. And actually, it was really nice that a couple of years after I started tattooing, that same boyfriend, we'd broken up by then, but he contacted me and said, I'm really sorry I said it wasn't for you. It definitely is. I can really tell.
Well, that was nice.
It was nice of him. He took his last girlfriend on a date. Their first date was to come and get tattooed by me. He got tattooed by me. She didn't. They'd been talking online for a while and he said, I'm going to go down to Sydney and get a tattoo from Onnie. Do you want to come with me for the drive? And so they drove down together and like ended up dating for like 2.5 years or something.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think I can't speak too much of I can't really gatekeep tattooing because if it had been more gatekept, I wouldn't be in it, and I'm very grateful and thankful to be here. So, yeah.
I like to, from time to time, look up, I'll just search tattoo on Google and look at news articles. Like, speaking of how like the normal world, you know, the world outside of tattooing views and discusses tattoos, I think is interesting to see. And so I've got some news articles bookmarked. But I definitely saw some trends. Like, if you had to guess, what do you think news articles about tattooing are about?
There's two. One is a kind of shock value. I saw one yesterday that was like, tatted up mum in the UK says she'll work whatever job you give her, but keeps spending her money on face tattoos. So there's that kind of like...
Yeah, like tabloid stuff.
Yeah, look at these tattooed freaks. And then every decade there's one that says tattooing, not just for sailors or criminals.
Yep.
And yeah.
So some of the trends that I saw, a lot of them are about safety. There's a lot of articles about like new studies show tattoo ink possibly could cause cancer.
Oh,
but a lot of the headlines are like more heavy-handed. And then you read them and they say, well, there's no definite information yet, but some studies are leading up to maybe finding something sometime eventually. So it's like all these sensationalized headlines. But I tend to like the type of articles that you mentioned first, which are the tabloid-ish, goofy ones. For example, I'd like to share one here with you today. From the New York Post, no less.
Oh.
The title is, I let a tattoo artist ink my face with surprise tat, and now I'm ashamed. So I'll read you an excerpt here. This modern-day scarlet letter stripped away her humanity. A former exotic dancer shared the humiliating story of how a well-known California artist inked the worst thing possible on her face as a goof, and the shame and embarrassment that ensued. A video describing her dehumanizing ordeal currently has 1.9 million views on TikTok.
Oh God, there's so much to say about that. And I obviously know very little about the situation just from that excerpt. I mean, look, if that's the way it happened, you know, that's awful. And I hate to think of anyone being taken advantage of by a tattoo artist, especially so publicly, like both sort of personally, like by having a tattoo that they hate on their face and by then filming it and posting it to social media. But maybe people don't go to artists and say, just do whatever you want to tattoo on my face as a surprise, like unknowingly, you know?
Right. Yes, I think everything you just said is true, all of those sides. Because as we read further, I just had a good, where is this? The woman explained that she had gotten the face ink. They keep calling it face ink, which I think is funny too. She'd gotten the face
as we
ink.
all do.
Yeah. She got the face ink when she was a, quote, 21 and dumb dancer in the, quote, YOLO phase of my life. I was having a beach day with my friend, and she told me her friend owned this tattoo shop in Laguna Beach, the woman said, describing her impressionable 20-something self. She said we should go, maybe hang out there and get some tattoos. When the tattoo artist asked what I wanted, I said, YOLO, let's do a face tattoo. Who cares? So the more I read, it's of course, you hate to hear somebody get taken advantage of, especially with their face. But the more you read, it's kind of like, you know, there were some mistakes all around made in this situation, it maybe sounds like. Anyway, in the reality of the situation, I think isn't even as interesting as just how funny all this is. But on her TikTok, she shows herself getting it lasered, and more or less what it was down the side, like in front of her ear, down towards her jaw. It was like filigree. It didn't, it's hard to tell because the photos that are in this article, they don't show it well, but supposedly the whole reasoning was that the artist did the filigree from a US $1 bill because she was a stripper. So he wanted to like signify a $1 bill as kind of like, oh, you stripper, here's your stripper tattoo, which like, yeah, that's a little gross, but it just looked like filigree to me. I don't think that there was a 1 on it. So it makes you wonder if these things were like... I don't know if
we've still got a $1 bill around here.
Yeah. But the fact that this is what people are seeing about tattooing, it's funny. And I guess it's better than the ink cancer articles that seem to be flooding all of the news because that's no good for us.
Maybe marginally. I think.
But I feel like this is the new generation of the, remember the woman that got all the stars tattooed on her face years ago?
Of course, yeah.
She like fell asleep and had like 3 times as many stars as she apparently had signed up for. This feels like the 2022 version of that.
I mean, we've all fallen asleep during a very short tattoo on our faces.
Exactly. It's so easy
who
to.
Hasn't?
It's like a lullaby.
Actually, my uncle Andrew is terrible. He always falls asleep during his tattoos.
Really?
And he just doesn't feel pain like a normal person. He got this huge ink. He got some mad ink on his ribs, and but fell asleep through that. And I just don't even comprehend how.
It must be nice.
I do think that story reinforces what you were saying earlier about our sort of responsibility as tattooers to say no to people sometimes. To me, it sounds a little bit like this tattooer was actually trying to be somewhat thoughtful and considerate of her. You know, he took into account her profession, which is, you know, look, maybe not one that you do for your whole life, so maybe you didn't take it into account that much. But I kind of like the symbolism of like taking an element from the money and then using that as a tattoo. Like,
well, the tone that she talks about it in the article is almost that it was like a demeaning choice.
Yeah, and a lot of I have quite a few of my clients and friends do sex work, so I do know that some of them take a lot of pride in that. In fact, look, really, all of them take a lot of pride in that kind of work, and I don't know if they would get a tattoo on their face to commemorate it. And I can certainly see that any amount of pride in sex work might be looked at as demeaning or like as marking someone's profession in that industry would be inherently demeaning. I don't think that it necessarily has to be that. I think that might just be the tone of the author of the article being like, how could anyone be a stripper and be proud of it? Like, oh, who would do that?
Right.
Actually, I know a lot of people and a lot of my clients do that and are very proud of it.
Sure.
So.
I like trying to put real logic to a New York Post article like this. That's the kind of ride I'm looking to take.
This down.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your willingness to go on that ride with me.
It's fun. There's one thing I love doing. It's speculating on the lives of people I know nothing about. So
exactly. I mean, what else are we supposed to talk about forever on these podcasts? That's what it's all about, is going down these roads.
Actually, I was thinking about that. It was like, I'm very, on my social media, I'm very private and I don't like to give a lot of myself away. But if you come and get tattooed by me, you'll know everything. I don't hold back. You'll hear all about like my Tinder dates and who I've been seeing and my current health issues and like why I hate a certain politician or we get to talk about all of it. Someone said to me like, oh, while I'm tattooing, I don't like to talk, sex, politics or religion. I'm like, what else is there to talk about? And, I love our job because, you get to meet someone on the day and then you spend 8 hours with them. And by the end of it, you know a lot about each other's lives. And, I really love people. And so I think that was a big part of why I was like, oh, yeah, tattooing's amazing. And this is what I want to do. People come to me for my, 8-hour one-woman show.
Do you have a lot of close friends outside of work?
Yeah, I do. And
what's that like?
Actually, it's pretty great because I think a lot of my closest friends are, like I mentioned, like my flatmate who I live with, he's a friend of mine since high school. A lot of them don't work in the tattoo industry. I certainly have very, very close friends that I've made through tattooing. But a lot of my closest and like local friends don't tattoo. So I think that provides some sort of good balance. It often means like, you know, I'm the expert that people come to, which is nice. I think it's good to have some sort of perspective outside of the industry and to sort of see what people are going through. And it definitely helps like relate to clients. And I certainly tattoo a lot of tattooers, but I also tattoo a lot of non-tattooers as well. So, yeah, it's good. It's good to have friends. I'd recommend it.
Noted. Well, let's wrap it up. This has been really fun.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you. It's so funny. It's like talking to like Peter Cundall or something. You maybe don't know him, who was a Tasmanian like gardener who was on the radio all the time. He's got a very distinctive voice. And but it's kind of like, oh, it's that famous voice that I know from all the podcasts.
Oh,
it's so exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And actually this podcast is one that I recommend to people if they're sort of interested in learning more about tattooing, because I really like your very balanced perspective on trends in the tattoo industry or different styles of tattooing. And I think that's that's always something that I've very much respected, like a nuanced viewpoint. Rather than just being like, these tattoos are shit and these are the only good tattoos.
I think that gets old, and I don't know if people want to listen to that every week for very long.
I mean, you know, we've all got that shop in town that we can go to if we want to hear that. So
That's true. That is true. Well, I guess, I guess that's that. I appreciate it.
Look, me too. Thank you. There is just one thing I want to say. This is the second podcast that I've ever done. And the first one was during lockdown. And I said that if anyone out there was listening wanted to send me some sex toys, that they could do it they could send them to TLD. And someone actually did.
They did? What did they send?
They did. They sent me this little vibrator that had like a neon yellow cover on it. And it was very cute. And the boys at the shop were all like maybe a little bit horrified. But I mean, if anyone else wants to do that, then they're welcome to. I'm still at TLD, which is at 102 Gymea Bay Road in Gymea, New South Wales. 2227 is the postcode. Just feel free to send me preferably new sex toys, weird pornography. Sam Rules just sent me a little pack of erotic postcards from Greece, and I've been doing, I don't know if you saw that like banana tattoo that I did recently, but that one was based off the playing cards, and so I've been using those as flash and giving them to people and saying like, this is kind of like my prompt for for tattoos and stuff.
Nice.
So if you've got any weird porn or things that you want me to see, like feel free to send them through. I always really appreciate it. All
right, everybody, you heard that. Let's make sure that we show Onnie our appreciation by sending all of the things that you have to give. And I hope that this works. And if you get a avalanche of mail, I want to get back on the show with you, and we got to talk about that, because that is an interesting concept of people actually following through to this call to action on the internet. I think it's important that we show the world how small the tattooing community actually is, and we're all connected, and we know we've all got some dildos to spare, you know.
Yeah. Go out, find a bargain bin anal vibrator plug and post it through to Australia.
They can have fun in customs going through all those packages.
I'll absolutely let you know. I'll tag you in any pictures of anything that I get.
Great. Maybe that will improve my algorithm as well if we're just tagging each other and things like that. All right. Well, that's that. I appreciate you coming all the way to the secret podcast bunker in Maine, and I hope you get home safe.
Thank you. Yeah, I better rush to the airport. It's going to be another sort of 18 hours flight back to Australia, and I've got a tattoo tomorrow. So
yeah, I think the bus is leaving, so we better hit it.
All right.
Cool.
Well, yeah. Have a great day.
Thanks. That was good.
That was really fun.
That was fun. That was a quick, almost an hour and a half. Felt like it was 20 minutes. Okay, everyone. What did you think? That was fun, wasn't it? Now I'm going to let you in a little secret. I think that after this, where we just left off in that interview, we probably talked for just as much time after that, off the record, quote unquote, but she told me that I could share it. Maybe I'll share that. Let me know. Do you want to hear more with Onnie and myself? And I can just dangle that in front of you like a little treat. You want a little treat? You want a little treat? Okay. Well, for now, though, that's all I have for you. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming back each episode, especially in the last year or so, as I've been very, very inconsistent. But I do love making the show for you, and I do love to know that you guys enjoy it as well. And because I've been posting sporadically, I urge you to, if you watch on YouTube, make sure you're subscribing. If you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, make sure that you're subscribed. That way you always get the notifications, because sometimes you might miss an episode. You might not even realize that I put one up. So make sure you're subscribed. Give a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Leave some comments. Do what you can to help out the algorithm gods, because that helps me. Okay? It's very important. I need those likes. Life is likes, and likes are life. Okay? Please. And just one more reminder, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, thank you to Go Reminders, and head to worshiptattoo.com. Go to the merch section and check out that new limited Books Closed t-shirt designed by the one and only Taki, who is the best. So check that out. Pick up a shirt before they are gone, and I will probably not print them again. And that is it. Thank you very much. I will see you all next time around. And yeah, I appreciate you all. Thanks.